Welcome to Lesson 6, Part 1. This lesson will cover basic type tools and some of the more advanced features of working with type. This is Part 1 of 2 parts. Going into Adobe Illustrator, I'm going to start with a new page. And the type tool is right up here. Okay, when you go to your toolbox, it's going to have this T, which is your type tool, but there is a sub-menu which you can tear off. And the different type tools include regular type, type in an area, type on a path. Then we have vertical type in an area, and vertical type on a path. For this purpose, we're just going to use the regular type tool. Now, before you start working with your type, you probably want to decide on the size of your type, the color of your type, and the font that you are using. There's two different ways that you can do this. You can either choose your font from up here, and once you start typing, you'll have that option. You have your character selection here. But the way that I really like to use it, instead of doing the options up at the top here, I like to go to Window, I like to go down to Type, and I like to go over to Character. This opens up a sub-window just for type, and it has many more options available in it. If you don't see all of this when you open up your character window, check the double-sided arrow right here next to the word character in the tab, and this will change the number of settings that you have available. Okay, full settings looks like this. The reason I like using this is because when I go to select a font, I can click on my font menu, and instead of just having a listing of the different types of fonts, I actually have a sample of what that font looks like. Okay, and depending on your settings, you may have different ones selected as your default font. I tend to use Arial Black quite often for my default font, and then from there I might choose others. So I'm going to choose Arial Black. I have a 36-point font selected. You can either select one of the preset numbers, or you can simply type in a number. You can also arrow up and arrow down, of course. You also have adjustments here for your kerning and your leading, your condensing, expanding, line spacing. All these different things pop up. Okay, so we'll get more into these a little bit later. Okay, once you have started typing, you get a feel for what the type looks like. You can change the color if you wish. I'm going to change the fill of my font. Have to have that selected. Okay, I'm not going to add a stroke or an outline to this. I left that as an empty or a non-color. I generally only use strokes or outlines on my fonts if the font is quite large and it's something like a heading for a page or a single piece of text on the entire page. If you start using outlines or strokes on your text, it can get really busy and really difficult to read. So be really careful if you do choose to use one of those. Okay, this is just standard type. You also have options of typing in an area or typing on a path. So to type in an area, I'm going to go ahead and draw an ellipse. I'm going to make sure that has no fill and no stroke, so it's just the outline of the object. And I'm going to put something in here called lorem ipsum. And if you do a search for lorem ipsum with your internet browser, one of the first sites that pops up is lipsum.com. And lipsum.com is really helpful. Lorem ipsum is a dummy text which we use a lot when we are designing pages and we don't have the actual text available to us yet. You can generate words or paragraphs or whatever it is that you need. I'm going to generate 2 paragraphs of lorem ipsum type, and it's just dummy text. It's actually in Latin, and if you know Latin then you can read this. I don't. But I'm going to go ahead and select this and copy it. Go into Adobe Illustrator. I'm back to my shape. I'm going to choose Area Type Tool, select my area, and you can either type into your area or you can paste the lorem ipsum that you have. And now this font is much too large for all that text to fit in this space, so I would either need a larger space or a smaller text. I'm going to try dropping this to about 14. It gets a lot more difficult to read, so you do need to be aware of that. So I would either have to go with a larger shape still or larger text, one of the two. But it gives you a feel for what can be done, but you can also see that sometimes it is difficult to read when you start using Area Type Tool. This is best saved for a smaller amount of text for this, but something which you really want to use something lower in your visual hierarchy. You don't want it to be your main text in a shape like this because it is much more difficult to read. Move this out of the way. Okay, the third tool is Type on a Path tool. And the last three on here are simply the vertical versions of the first three. So I'm only going to show you these first three, but you're certainly welcome to experiment with these others. Okay, so for Type on a Path, I first need a path. And you can draw a path with a number of different tools. I generally start with the pen tool. It's going to be a little bit too steep. You don't want anything too drastic. I'm going to start over on that path. If you have too curvy of a line or too drastic of a shape, it does get much more difficult to read, so do keep that in mind. Okay, you also probably do not want to fill on your path because it does make it much more difficult to work with. I'm going to adjust my path. And you can edit your path once it has text on it or before you put text on it. Either one is kind of your choice. I just want to make it a little bit softer here. Okay, and this is another technique which I would definitely reserve for something very special, not with a lot of words on it because it does get difficult to read. And your font choice or your typeface choices will also make a difference as to how easy this is to read. Alright, so once you have your path made and you're fairly satisfied with it, you click on Type on a Path tool, and then you click on your path. Okay, and you might determine that you need this to be a smaller or larger font. You might change the color, whatever the case you need to do here. I'm going to try that, maybe a little bit larger. Let me try 28 and see how that works. Okay, not bad. Okay, this is another spot where you might need to change the tracking or the leading or the kerning for your characters. Okay, when you read the chapter in your text and review the PowerPoint presentation on text, it will talk about leading and tracking and kerning. Make sure that you read through that and that you review these options here on your palette. That will make a big difference in the readability of your fonts. Okay, once you have this on a path, you do have a couple more options for you. Using your regular selection tool, you have 3 lines on your path, and you can move these lines to show the beginning or the end of your path. But you'll see you can cut off, so you need to be careful. You can also go to that one in the middle and you can flip it to the opposite side of your path if that's something that you need to do. It really depends on the shapes you're working with and your layout and such. But there are a number of options for you. Alright, I'm going to pause there and I'm going to go on to Lesson 6, Part 2. Okay, you can choose to erase all this, or you can start with a blank page or leave this as it is.